Her father got married to another wife known as Obiageli. From the moment Obiageli stepped her foot into Ifoma's home, Obiageli had no form of compassion nor love for Ifoma. Once upon a time, in the ancient village of Umoa in Africa, there lived a beautiful blind village girl known as Ifoma. Ifoma was unlike every other person in her village. She was born blind. Her world was cloaked in darkness from the moment she took her first breath on earth. Ifoma's blindness made life very difficult for her because there were many things ordinary people does that Ifoma couldn't do without needing the assistance of another person. When Ifoma's parents discovered after her birth that she was blind, they were so devastated. They took Ifoma to various healers in their village to see if they could cure her blindness. But none of the healers could cure Ifoma's blindness. The healers, however, repeatedly told Ifoma's parents that Ifoma was a child of destiny and should never be made to feel left out in her life because of her blind state. Ifoma's parents raised Ifoma as if Ifoma could see. They taught Ifoma how to do simple chores around the house and even how to go to the market, sometimes on her own. This grew Ifoma's sense of independence, confidence, and resilience so much that before Ifoma turned 14, if you didn't come really close to Ifoma, you may not know that Ifoma was a blind girl. Ifoma was a very positive girl who approached life with so much optimism in her. Ifoma's tragedies in life began after she turned 15 and her mother died. Her father got married to another wife known as Obiageli. From the moment Obiageli stepped her foot into Ifoma's home, Obiageli had no form of compassion nor love for Ifoma. Obiageli was a very beautiful woman whose heart was as black as charcoal. Whenever Obiageli looked at Ifoma, the blind girl, she would always boil in anger. The love between Ifoma and her father made Obiageli so jealous and angry all the time. Obiageli saw Ifoma as a threat to her and her daughter Ogechi, whom Ifoma's father adopted as his own when he got married to Obiageli. Ifoma was equally a constant reminder of the love and affection Ifoma's late mother shared with Ifoma's father. All these made Obiageli so mad at Ifoma. All Obiageli wanted was for Ifoma to leave her father's house so that her and her daughter Ogechi would dominate the home alone. Obiageli went as far as poisoning the heart of her daughter Ogechi against Ifoma when she noticed that Ogechi was starting to warm up to Ifoma. Ifoma equally sensed it on her own that her new step-sister Ogechi, who used to be very cordial with her when they came to her home, was starting to distance herself from her. Irrespective of that, Ifoma continued to be graceful and kind to everyone, as she had no idea that her new stepmother hated her so much. One fateful day, a few years later, Ifoma's father returned home with a very joyful news. It was that one of his friend's sons, who was a very wealthy merchant in the city, was returning home to find a bride. And his friend wanted his son to marry Ifoma. Despite Ifoma's blindness, Ifoma was an extremely beautiful girl. She was well-mannered and equally very hardworking. Many people in their village loved Ifoma so much because of her cheerful character. Unknown to Ifoma and her father, this amazing news got Ifoma's stepmother Obiageli very angry. Obiageli was a very selfish and ambitious woman who wanted everything beautiful for herself and her daughter alone. Obiageli spent several days and nights plotting varieties of tricks she would use to deceive the returning wealthy merchant into marrying her own daughter instead of Ifoma. Obiageli started her tricks by fabricating character flaws about Ifoma and spreading it to some villagers whom she knew loved Ifoma, as well as Ifoma's father. These complaints made Ifoma's father so angry with Ifoma, as he wondered why Ifoma, his daughter, would want to ruin her chances of getting married, despite she knew that as a blind girl, her chances were very slim. Obiageli, while soiling Ifoma's name, ensured that her daughter Ogechi was always dressed in beautiful clothes and jewelries. She equally started soiling Ifoma's clothes secretly, so that whenever Ifoma stepped out, people would stare at her as if she were a dirty girl. Ogechi, who used to be very rude, suddenly started pretending to be a cheerful and graceful person. One calm evening, as the days for the arrival of the wealthy merchant was coming close, while Ifoma was returning from her usual evening walks, some henchmen crept behind Ifoma, bound her hands and legs, and whisked her away deep into an unfamiliar forest. For days, Ifoma was all alone in the thick forest, crying and wondering where she must have offended her stepmother to warrant plotting a kidnap for her, as she overheard the kidnappers discussing their fees with her stepmother Obiageli before they detoured into the unknown forest where they abandoned Ifoma. Ifoma screamed out her lungs severally, but nobody could hear her, as the forest was very deep. Ifoma's heart was so heavy with sorrow and fear, but she managed to pull herself together as she tried to draw strength from the memory of her late mother's love and her mother's constant reminder that she, Ifoma, was destined for greatness. Meanwhile, Ifoma's father back home was so heartbroken over her disappearance. He searched endlessly for Ifoma for days, but Ifoma was nowhere to be found. He was left with no option than to give his second wife's daughter Ogechi to the wealthy merchant as his new bride. Ifoma's stepmother, Obiageli's joy knew no bounds because her new son-in-law showered her with many beautiful gifts when he came to their home to pay her daughter's bride price. Irrespective of Ifoma's great strength and braveness in the thick forest where she was left for dead, she was starting to grow really weak physically, as she had spent many days inside the forest without food and water, as her hands and feet were bound. But somehow, she sometimes manages to sing so as to keep her mind and soul distracted from the pain she was passing through. One day, as Ifoma's voice melodiously went high into the sky, an old woman who had come into the forest to pick some herbs was shocked to hear such a beautiful voice in that thick forest where people rarely went to. She followed the sounds curiously, and that was how she discovered Ifoma, where she had been abandoned for days to die. "What are you doing here?" screamed the old woman upon seeing Ifoma. Ifoma narrated what her stepmother did to her to the old woman. This brought tears to the eyes of the old woman, who quickly unbound the shackles on Ifoma and took Ifoma to her home in a nearby village. The woman started to care for Ifoma. She was so surprised on how hardworking Ifoma was, despite her blindness. Ifoma had so much love for the old woman, as there was something about the old woman that made Ifoma strongly feel that her late mother was back to life inside the old woman's body. One sunny morning, many years later, after Ifoma had just finished her day's chores, she wondered why the old woman hasn't stepped out of her hut since morning. So she went to fetch the old woman in the old woman's hut. Ifoma shouted, "Mama!" But there was no response, which was so unusual. Ifoma ran into Mama's hut. She shook Mama, but Mama was stiff and not moving. Ifoma was immediately enveloped in fear as she kept shaking Mama vigorously, but there was no response. Ifoma was so confused and very terrified. She quickly ran to make Mama some herbs and tried forcing the herbs down Mama's throat, but Mama was still not responding. Ifoma ran out and started screaming out for help. Some villagers ran to their home to assist her. The villagers got some healers who did all they could to revive Mama, but Mama was unresponsive to all they were doing. As the fading light of the evening started to cast its shadows, the healers informed Ifoma that Mama was dead, and Mama needed to be buried immediately before she would start smelling. Ifoma was devastated. She requested that they allowed her spend some time with Mama alone before they would bury Mama. Ifoma went into Mama's hut, sat next to Mama on Mama's bed, and she started to cry. She first thanked Mama so much for all Mama had done for her for many years now. and she promised Mama that she would never forget her. As Ifoma leaned over Mama to hug her one last time, her tears were uncontrollable as she was in deep emotions. She wept so bitterly over Mama's body, asking Mama what she wanted her to be doing alone in this cruel and wicked world without her. As the tears fell from Ifoma's eyes, she suddenly started to lose consciousness and collapsed on the floor. The well-wishers rushed into the room and pulled up Ifoma. As they were trying to revive Ifoma back to life, they heard a loud cough from Mama's bed. Strangely, it was Mama. The well-wishers all ran away. It happened that unknown to Ifoma, she possessed magical tears that had the ability of healing deadly diseases and raising the dead. Ifoma's magical tears brought Mama back to life when she leaned over Mama and was crying. Soon, the news about Ifoma's mysterious tears spread far and wide as many people started coming from different places to Ifoma's home for Ifoma to either heal them or help them raise their dead relatives. Ifoma was now being seen as some sort of demigod by many people. She, however, remained humble, regardless of the wealth her hidden gift was starting to bring into her life and Mama's lives. One fateful day, some group of men paid Ifoma a visit from the land of Umoa, pleading that Ifoma should follow them to their town as an unknown plague was ravaging their village, and their king sent them to bring Ifoma to come and help them as many people were dying in their village. Mama turned down their request. She told them that Ifoma may die if she were to heal a large number of people, as it takes Ifoma days to recover after healing just one person. Talk more of an entire village. Ifoma, who was secretly panicking over the news and wondering if her father was okay, pleaded with Mama to allow her go, that she will be fine. Mama had no option than to grudgingly let Ifoma, who kept insisting that she wanted to help the people of Umoa, go. Ifoma was filled with bittersweet memories when she arrived Umoa. Sadly, the people of Umoa who received her didn't even recognize her, as she was a completely grown woman now. All the sick people in Umoa were gathered at the village clinic. Ifoma went round their various beds and wept bitterly over their sick bodies. Ifoma was able to produce a lot of tears that served that amount of people, because the people of Umoa were her flesh and blood, and her heart was so heavy with pains as her brain kept replaying how she was left for dead in a thick forest, all because her stepmother didn't want her to marry the returning wealthy merchant. She wondered what happened after her disappearance. Did her father attempt to look for her at all? Was her father lying on those sick beds? And many thoughts and pains made her collapse on intervals. The people of Umoa were so shocked, as they had never seen such miracle their whole lives. There was equally great joy everywhere, as everyone's health started to stabilize back to normal. The king of Umoa, out of joy, told Ifoma to name whatever it was she wanted them to use and thank her for what she did for them. Ifoma requested that her father and stepmother be summoned to the king's palace. The king was surprised, but he obliged her immediately. One look at the blind healer, Ifoma's father knew that it was his daughter. He ran to Ifoma and hugged her so tightly as they both started to weep in each other's arms. Ifoma's stepmother Obiageli was so shocked to see that Ifoma was the mysterious blind healer. She shamefully knelt down immediately and started asking Ifoma for forgiveness. Everyone, especially Ifoma's father, was confused over what was going on with his second wife. Ifoma narrated what her stepmother did to everyone present. How her stepmother arranged Ifoma's kidnap many years ago and left Ifoma to die in the thick forests just because her stepmother was jealous of Ifoma and wanted the returning wealthy merchant to marry her own daughter Ogechi and not Ifoma. Everyone was shocked, especially Ifoma's father. Ifoma's father started shouting at his second wife, and he publicly told everyone that his marriage with Obiageli was going to end on that very day. The whole crowd was shocked over everything going on. Ifoma's father continued to plead with his daughter to forgive him. He told her he wasn't aware of all these stories, as he was so devastated over her disappearance. The king of Umoa decreed that Obiageli will be banished from their village to never return again. Ifoma, however, pleaded with the king not to banish Obiageli, since Obiageli had already asked for forgiveness. She told the king to allow Obiageli the grace to mend her ways before the eyes of the same villagers she offended in the past. The people of Umoa welcomed Ifoma back home to her village as they showered her with many gifts. Mama was so happy to see that her adopted daughter Ifoma finally got justice after so many years. And she was happy that Ifoma was finally reunited with her father in an honorable way. She came to live with Ifoma and her father, and they all lived happily ever after. The moral of this story is that in this life, whenever we find ourselves at some extremes in life, we should always try to hang in and stay hopeful, because sometimes in life, that very difficult situation that breaks our hearts may be our stepping stone to unlocking greater things for us. Secondly, wickedness never pays in this life. It doesn't really matter how long one perpetrates their evil in life. Someday, justice will surely fish them out. Lastly, we should stop looking down on people because of their physical differences or challenges. Because sometimes in life, great things come in small packages. Thank you for watching.